Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gen Talks, a podcast where we talk about mindset, listening to our intuition, trusting our gut, channeling our inner voice, our self awareness, love, relationships, emotions. We all have them, but we don't want to talk about them. How to cope with the loss of a loved one and what those healthy coping mechanisms look like, the rules of fitness, and so much more. If you are new here, my name is Jennifer, spelled with two N's, but I'm a Jen with one N. I know it's a little complicated, but I like to keep it simple, and that's why it's well Jen with one N. If you're coming back because you are wondering how generational trauma and emotional availability tie together, then welcome back. Either way, I'm happy you are here. We know who you are, Jen with one N. Can you just get to the point? Well, someone is a little impatient, and don't worry because I will cover that trait later on, so maybe you can learn a thing or two. But before we do, let's talk about emotional availability. Okay? Okay. Emotional availability stems from vulnerability and where we are not afraid to connect with others and let them into our internal worlds, where we are in tune with our emotions and accept ourselves as a whole person, meaning accepting ourselves for each individual emotion or the different colored crayons, aka emotions, in our box, and not paint ourselves as a bad person if we feel anything less than happy. This is a safe, non judgmental space that is kind, gentle, understanding, and knows it's okay to feel a range of emotions and to not be overpowered by them. Another element is not disconnecting ourselves or running from emotions and being aware that they exist. Also, in this space, we don't let our emotions define or overpower us. Emotional availability is a place that has no room for ego and is filled with grace, knowing that we will have moments when we feel bogged down, sad, depressed, alone, or angry. But that's okay because that just means there might be something troubling us. And this happens to everyone. So you're not alone. When this happens, it means our inner voice and self awareness are saying, hey, something doesn't feel right and I need help. And that's totally okay because we all need help sometimes. And if you're saying to yourself, I don't need help from anyone, well, that is ego coming in and telling you a bold faced lie. Emotional availability is compared to a classic fairy tale called Goldilocks and the Three Bears by Robert Southey, where Goldilocks walks into a house where three bears live while they are away. In this section of the fairy tale, Goldilocks is looking for something to eat and sees three individual bowls filled with porridge on the table. As she tries the first bowl of porridge, she notices that it's too hot and immediately puts it down. As she takes a bite of porridge from the second bowl, she notices the temperature is too cold and isn't right. Goldilocks then lifts the third bowl, and as she takes a bite, she feels that the temperature is just right, meaning it is not too hot and not too cold, and felt safe and comfortable eating from the third bowl. The same concept applies to emotional availability, since when the porridge is too hot, the person is rooted in anger, ego, is insensitive, impatient, and tends to react. It means it is not safe to have any sort of difficult conversation with them because you might get burnt. When the porridge is too cold, this person avoids their emotions, pushes them aside, does not let anyone in, which stems from a place of not trusting others, is afraid of being hurt, and fears the emotions that are anything less than feeling happy. This person doesn't show warmth, empathy, or compassion towards others and doesn't leave a space for emotional connection. But the porridge in the middle is just right, since this is when the person is calm, cool, and collected, and doesn't push their emotions aside, doesn't react and fly off the handle, but is emotionally available, level headed, and respects the fact that they are a whole person filled with a balance of joy, sadness, anger, excitement, hope, grief, happiness, feeling lost, peaceful, scared, love, anxious, enthusiasm, etc., and are at peace with that. This person remains calm during the midst of all emotions and makes room for them since each emotion has its own temperature. And if you don't keep them in check, they might become too hot or too cold. And that doesn't only affect you, but it can hurt others too. Who do you think we are, Jen? A bunch of 2-year-olds? Who let you in here? Okay. And as I was saying, you keep cutting me off, but we're going to get back to the topic here. All right. I'm calm. Thank you. All right. So, emotional availability doesn't just happen overnight, since it takes awareness, which we all have to understand so we are in tune with what is going on in our internal worlds. Emotional awareness is when you make room for all emotions and actively practice acceptance by not pushing the emotions away that you don't like, that you accept that they exist and not let one or the other define you. This also leads to understanding that you are human and how important it is to validate your feelings and know that this too shall pass. To have room within yourself to feel how you feel, even though you may not want to feel a certain way at the moment. For example, sometimes you're angry, sad, depressed. It just means something is troubling you, and it's important to sit with those feelings and gently talk it out. Try to not let them overpower you and work through them since the feeling doesn't last forever and nothing is permanent. When someone is emotionally aware, they understand that they are not flawed for having emotions that are anything less than being happy and allow themselves to be fully alive. We are human beings after all. Emotional awareness is accepting that we have a crayon box of different colored emotions living inside of us, and that just because we don't like a certain crayon doesn't mean we ignore it, since every crayon or emotion has its purpose. But the key is to not discard that crayon or emotion and act like it doesn't exist, but to say, hey, I accept you and want to understand you. As you do that, a calm wave rushes over and you feel at ease. And just like the third bowl of porridge, you feel just right. Really, Jen? Now you want us to talk to a bunch of crayons? Well, someone is in the mood today, but you know what? I'm going to stay calm here. I'm staying calm, cool, and collected, all right? Thank you. Anyway, the opposite side of the coin of emotional awareness is emotional availability, which is where you criticize or beat yourself up for having emotions that you don't like and try to sweep them under the rug or push them aside and act as if they don't exist and are not a part of you. But the more you keep sweeping those quote unquote negative emotions under the rug or pushing them away, those emotions will come back at you full force and you will wish you listened in the beginning. The more you sweep the emotions under the rug eventually starts lifting up until there's no space left to shove your emotions, and all of a sudden, boom, it all comes out because you were triggered by something so small and blew up. And when you blow up, no one is going to want to deal with you. Another part of this is when we tell ourselves that if we feel anything less than positive, meaning happy, hopeful, cheerful, excited, then something is fundamentally wrong with us, which causes us to either shove the quote unquote negative emotions under the rug or shut down. When we don't honor our internal crayon box of emotions, we start to become disconnected with ourselves and lose sight of our individual authenticity and act out on our emotions. A lack of emotional awareness or availability is not something we are born with, since we are all born with the same box of crayons or emotions and feelings. But sometimes those crayons are not allowed to be used due to our environment or how we were raised, which might be connected to something called generational trauma, which I will go into later on in the episode. So I briefly talked about both sides of the coin, so heads or tails, when it comes to emotional availability and emotional unavailability. The head side consists of an element called compassion and sensitivity, which both go hand in hand. Compassion and sensitivity are when someone is understanding of other people's thoughts, feelings, and take those into consideration before speaking. And when you genuinely feel for what the other person is thinking or feeling or any issues they are facing. Those who are sensitive to other people's feelings place themselves in others' shoes to get a glimpse of their world and seek to understand the emotions and the message a person is sharing. Compassion creates a safe space for people to share their thoughts and feelings because they trust that you understand what they're going through, whether it is good or bad, and they feel listened to, supported, and not judged. Compassion and sensitivity breeds trust and a strong emotional connection and has no room for judgment, shame, and ego. Both of these elements of emotional availability are strengths because it shows that it is not all about you and you are genuinely concerned about what this person is talking about and connected to. Sensitivity also ties into the art of listening And not hearing is when you are looking with your ears. Really, Jen, there's a difference between hearing and listening. Yes, and clearly you're not looking with your ears and are hearing because you just interrupted me. But I won't let you rattle Zen Jen, okay? But I will answer your question. So here we go. Hearing is when you're not actively listening to what the other person is saying, since you're focusing on what you are going to say next, and interrupt the person because you feel that what you have to say is more important. This action comes across as being insensitive and not truly caring about what the other person is sharing with you. Listening is where you're looking with your ears, meaning listening to someone's tone, watching their body language, and listening to their words because that shows the message that is being conveyed and who this person is. When you actively listen to someone, you then will know what to say. Also, when someone is interrupted, it is a sign of disrespect and that the sound of their voice is more important to what the other person has to say, when in reality, what both people have to share is equally important. When someone is interrupted, their train of thought is cut off and they lose track and feel as if they're not being listened to, and that their voice or opinion does not matter to the other person, which can eventually cause this person to shut down internally or erupt. Just how both sides of every coin are equal, what you have to say is equally as important to what the other person has to say. Moral of the story is, if you don't like being interrupted, then why is it okay for you to interrupt someone? And what are you trying to prove when you do it? Which leads to the opposite side of the coin of compassion sensitivity, which is insensitivity. Insensitivity is composed of lack of empathy or consideration for what someone has to say and how they feel. This trait is connected to judgment, where the person does not seek to understand what you're going through and does not take your feelings into account. They shoot from the hip and do not think about the impact of their words. An example might come in the form of a joke, but here's the deal: jokes always have an ounce of truth behind them. It's just a thought. Even when someone says, "Oh, it's just a joke. Oh, I was kidding," it never really is. Please, you think this Jersey girl is going to fall for that? Don't try to pull the wool over my eyes, okay? But I'm going to stay calm and move forward. Another element of emotional availability is open communication, which is where you feel mentally, physically, and emotionally comfortable when discussing your emotions, thoughts, and feelings, and trust that your partner is listening and seeking to understand where you are coming from and how you both feel is valid. Open communication shows a level of trust where you can confide in each other, where there's no criticism, where you make the active effort and time to express how you feel and know that nothing is personal, where you can naturally breathe and express. But there is a polar opposite, which is when your partner openly expresses their thoughts or feelings about something and you listen. But when it is time for you to express your thoughts or feelings, they don't give you the same time and attention to you. This person might be emotionally stunted and can't meet you on the same level emotionally. So they completely ignore what you say by looking at their phone or try to brush it off and change the subject because this person feels that what they have to say is more important. It might be looking for some sort of control. When your partner does not give you the same attention, it makes you feel as if your voice does not matter and that communication is completely one sided. The safe space turns cold. And as I mentioned in the fourth episode regarding the foundation of relationships, when there is no communication, the space for emotional connection turns to ice. So does trust. And if that happens, then what's the point? If it is left unresolved, then that relationship will sink faster than quicksand. And we sure don't want that to happen, right, team? Which is why it is important to listen or seek to understand, which is another key component of emotional availability. Listening or seeking to understand is where you try to understand where the person is coming from, why they feel the way they do, what makes them who they are. Where you listen, ask questions out of a place of care, concern, compassion, curiosity, and not judgment. Seeking to understand does not tie into gathering the details of someone's story just so you can throw it back in their face later on. But it's when you are saying, I want to put myself in your shoes and walk a mile or two because I want to see your perception of the world. This element creates a strong connection because there is recognition, understanding, kindness, patience, and there's an open minded conversation. Sometimes we are not going to understand how someone feels, and when that happens, it's okay to ask why this person feels the way they do and to get a deeper look or understanding into what is happening behind the curtain. Also, it is important to be patient when someone talks, since sometimes they need time to express their thoughts. But when we don't listen, it can lead to the my way or the highway mentality, which reeks of ego or only how you think or feel is the right way, and no one else's feelings are important. This mentality, which is rooted in a weak ego, is a catalyst for a lot of arguments in all types of relationships because it shows that only your viewpoint matters and no one else's, and that someone else's thoughts or feelings don't matter either. But if someone listens to your viewpoint and seeks to wholeheartedly understand you, then why can't you do the same? Or is there some emotional immaturity? And hey, I'm not judging. I'm here to help and bring truth to light so we can be better and treat others with the peace, love, and respect we all deserve. Emotional availability has no room for hostility. It operates from a place of peace and understanding and remains calm when having a difficult conversation, since it is important to note and to always, always, always remember that nothing in life is personal. This person is not consumed by anger, does not lash out, is not verbally abusive, and understands the importance of calmly having a discussion with others, does not fly off the handle in an argument, and is level headed. This person understands the importance of looking at something objectively and values the importance of seeing both sides to each situation. Also, they do not take it personally and respects the other person's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and creates a safe space for it to be shared and does not ridicule or judge others if they have a different opinion. Someone who is not hostile means when they communicate, they don't need to show dominance or control by yelling, being verbally abusive, violent, or giving the silent treatment. Hostility is a byproduct of dominance and control where a person is trying to get a point across and feel by acting out violently, being verbally abusive, yelling, or giving the silent treatment, they will be in charge. This characteristic is caused by seeking control and dominance, since this person feels as if they are not being listened to, need to take their power back. When someone is hostile, it may be that they grew up in an emotionally unsafe environment where there is very little room to express their thoughts and feelings and had very little to no control over their lives as a child. Also, when they express their thoughts or feelings, they were ridiculed, put down, and not listened to. When someone feels as if their voice is not being heard, they need to show dominance and control by acting out and yelling. But when someone is hostile, the angry words fall through the cracks, and all we see is a ticking time bomb. And no one wants to be around that, since it is a clear indicator that this person is emotionally unstable. Emotional stability is understanding that it is important to make room for the complexity of emotions and not let them overpower you, but to listen without judgment, to understand the message they are sending and to not be defined by them. Emotional stability is where you are calm amidst the storm. It's important to always remember that how you feel is valid and that an emotion does not last forever. For example, when the crayon of anger pops up, and that could be any color you want it to be, understand why that crayon popped up from the box and what it is trying to say. Also, no crayon or emotion is quote unquote negative. You can take that crayon out of the box to understand it and channel it to create something beautiful, whether it be developing your inner strength by going to the gym, painting, sculpting, writing, building, etc. It's important to always remember that how you feel is valid and that an emotion does not last forever. The key is to not shove that crayon or that emotion back in the box and pretend like it doesn't exist, because when that happens, anger festers from the inside. And if not channeled correctly, then that is a demise, which results in someone who is emotionally unstable, where they act out on their emotions without slowing down, taking a deep breath, and thinking their feelings through. This causes the person to lash out when they are angry and are unaware of who they can hurt. Keep in mind, when you are angry, it's not about you. When you lash out at someone and show that streak of anger, people will start walking on eggshells and honestly won't even want to be around you. Are we done yet, Jen, with one end? Like, we haven't even gotten to like generational trauma. You are really testing my patience today, but it's not working. Nice try. Anyway, so Generational trauma is something that is passed down from generation to generation and can often go unnoticed since we are designed to think that the patterns we were taught as children are right because of the people who raised us. These patterns consist of ways of thinking, how to process feelings and emotions, routines, career choices, who we marry, how to act, appear, how to talk and treat people, how to manage and cope with life, facing hardships, and etc. These patterns that your parents operate under or attached to might be how they were raised and view it as normal, since if this is what their parents taught them, then it has to be the right way. But sometimes it's not. The patterns don't change due to fear for breaking them or due to not reflecting and seeing the flaws in a certain paradigm. For example, sometimes our internal dialogue or the way we think might be based off of something we were told when we were children and is carried with us through adulthood. Oftentimes it goes unnoticed because as life gets busy, the gap of time we have to self reflect and how we got to where we are today grows smaller and smaller. And before we know it, we are stuck in patterns or loops that are not helping us grow and might be detrimental. It's important to note that the words and opinions of others, even the ones that are closest to us, do not define us or our lives. At the end of the day, it's about how we view ourselves and channel the courage we have inside to break free of those patterns and form new ones. New patterns that help us grow, help us develop, and be free to be who we want to be. To help us connect with other people and to be vulnerable and not stay stuck. To customize our own life with healthier ways of thinking. Sometimes the patterns we apply to our lives are patterns that were handed down to us by previous generations. And depending on the pattern, we have the choice to make it stop. We have the choice to say, enough is enough. It ends with me. An example might be that your parent was brought up in another country or raised in a household where emotions were not discussed, where feeling anything less than happy or strong was a sign of weakness, where if you wanted to talk about something that bothered you, you were told to write it off, let it go, and move on. But how does that help? As children, we sometimes, and I say sometimes, because every person on this planet has an individual upbringing where we are brought up with different morals, values, beliefs, and traditions. And depending on what they are, we have the choice to live by them as if they are a code, or we can break the chains. Something to keep in mind is that sometimes people are emotionally unavailable since they did not grow up in a safe environment where a range of emotions were acceptable to have. Where if this person was upset about something, felt sad, down, or depressed, they were told to let it go, move on. Hearing those dismissive words over and over again causes a person to feel that it doesn't matter if they are sad or upset about something. And if they are, then it is a sign of weakness. And you're only strong if you don't feel anything except for the positive emotions or feeling happy all the time. When someone communicates, when someone consistently hears, let it go, move on, they lose the ability to process their emotions and aren't able to express how they truly feel about an issue. Eventually, emotions become foreign because they were taught by the people they trust the most to dismiss their feelings. But what they do not know is that the more they hear those words, the more they keep shoving how they feel or that emotion aside, and there's only so much a person can take after a while. The more a person hears those words to let it go, move on, stay strong, they subconsciously start operating under a pattern that is not okay to express emotions, cry, talk about feelings, and have a conversation about a situation or issue that is bothering them. But when we are not allowed to express ourselves, we slowly become ticking time bombs. And then one day, boom, we explode. The suppressed emotions eventually transform themselves into anger or being too hot, being standoffish or too cold, feeling lost, and fearful because these emotions might be overpowering to process. Although, in the parent's eyes, the advice of let it go, move on may be coming from a good place because parents don't want their children to suffer and want nothing but the best for their kids. But subconsciously, it does more harm than good. We might ask ourselves, why do our parents tell us to let it go and move on? I'm trying to say something here. Will you listen? But keep in mind, maybe our parents were told the same thing growing up. Maybe they grew up in another country or an environment where emotions were not talked about, since the primary focus was how to get food on the table to feed their families, or that expressing your emotions, talking about your feelings, and or crying was a sign of weakness. Celebrating birthdays, showing any sort of physical affection like hugging their children was not a part of their childhood because maybe love was shown by acts of service and making sure the lights stayed on and that their families were fed. Maybe you grew up in a home where you were told crying doesn't solve your problems. Those words teach you that it's not okay to cry, to feel your emotions, that you are weak and there's something wrong with you. Here's the deal: if we don't sit back and reflect on those words that we may have heard from our parents and we pass those same words down to our kids, well, guess what? We are not only staying stuck in a loop, but passing down the same pattern or way of thinking to our children and carrying down generational trauma. It is important to remember that you are not your mom or your dad or your sister or your cousin, but you are you. If we don't take the time to look inward and truly understand what these patterns are, how they shape us, and where we learned them, we will not only continue to operate under the same line of thinking, but our children will too, and so forth. Depending on what the pattern might be, it can also unknowingly interfere with relationships. For example, if you were taught as a child that sadness is weakness, no one likes a man who cries. If you are not thin, no one will love you. Stay strong, and may have been told how to dress and how to look, then where is your authenticity? Where is your voice? Generational trauma might look like when a parent is sharing a story from their past, and then all of a sudden they automatically stop the conversation, shut down on the inside, and shift gears onto something else. This situation may happen because the storyteller might be experiencing emotions that are foreign since they are unsure how to process them and feel uncomfortable expressing themselves since they were never given the space to do so and haven't figured out how to let it go. But why did this person stop? And where did they learn that pattern of shutting down from? As I mentioned before, our upbringing and environment shapes how we interact with our emotions and with the outside world. This person has a hard time expressing or verbally communicating their emotions and with the or feelings. And when they start to feel a certain way, they shut down because they were not given the chance to express themselves growing up, and therefore never worked through the pain, frustration, and or any other emotions that appear. And when it comes time to opening up, they subconsciously shut down on the inside, close the door on the conversation, and change to something else. If those thoughts, feelings, or emotions are not dealt with, they fester, which causes the person to be closed off emotionally and emotionally unavailable since they don't know how to talk about their emotions. And instead of understanding them, they push them away. And if they are not released, resentment grows. Generational trauma also interferes with patience. For example, when someone is not patient with you, it's not personal. It might be that they were rushed by their parents as children, and when they grow up, they tend to rush others out of control because they didn't have control over their own lives as kids and were not taught how to be patient with others. It might be that their parents were controlled, told how to think and act, or maybe they operated under survival mode and had to rush to make a decision and are subconsciously operating this way. The point is, they may not have had the freedom to make their own choices, were rushed, and were not taught the importance of not rushing someone. They may not have been taught the idea that nothing in life is in your control, and the only thing you can control is yourself. And without that, impatience takes over. Impatience causes the space of emotional availability to shrink because it shows that this person is quick to anger, cannot be talked to or reasoned with, does not care about other people's opinions, and wants everything on their time because as children, they were controlled by their parents, told what to do, and did not have any control over any part of their childhood. This is just one example of how generational trauma interferes with emotional availability, since this person felt like they were controlled as a kid, meaning maybe they were not allowed to spend time with other kids their own age, go on class trips, etc., and therefore feel as if their life was slowed down because of it and didn't have any freedom during their childhood. These types of situations cause them to become impatient as adults because they feel as if their life was on pause and were not given a chance or a choice to be themselves. This person forms a tendency to rush others and everything around them so they can be in control and feel as if nothing can slow them down. So let's say you're in a relationship and you're patient when your partner is expressing their feelings, but your partner rushes you in the conversation. When that happens, it might mean that they are seeking some sort of control because they are powerless as a kid. When someone reacts with impatience, it stumps the pillar of emotional availability in relationship because no one feels comfortable around someone who has streaks of anger where they can lash out and be verbally abusive, who doesn't give the other person time to express their thoughts and feelings, and doesn't create a safe space for open communication. And just in case you missed it, I talk about these pillars in the fourth episode. Just want to throw it out there. It's on YouTube and Spotify. Okay, anyway. But if this pattern or loop is not broken and not restructured into a paradigm of patience, then generational trauma might be passed down to their future children and so forth. So, do you see how generational trauma can be passed down? And that if you don't take your power back and end it, it will continue to be passed down for generations to come? Just a thought. Generational trauma can also alter how we interact with the world, how we are taught and told to look, act, and be a certain way. And if we are not, then something is fundamentally wrong with us. For example, let's say as a child you were told that if you don't look, think, or act a certain way, or if you're not viewed as perfect in everyone's eyes, then you won't be liked. This line of thinking is detrimental since it teaches a person that if they are not perfect and liked by everyone, then there is something fundamentally wrong with them. This causes people to lose sight of themselves, their authenticity, identity, because they are operating under this loop or pattern that they were taught as a child. That if you're not perfect, don't look, act, or think a certain way, or if you're not viewed as perfect in everyone's eyes, then you won't be liked. Authenticity falls to the wayside, and we are no longer living in our power and our truth. We are unsure of our interests and don't make the active choice to connect with people that are right for us and just talk to others because we are worried about their perception of us if we don't talk to them, which leads to boundaries and people pleasing. And that is another episode for another day. But do you see how this all intertwines with each other? It's complicated, right? But we have the choice to keep it simple, to break the complex entanglement of patterns that don't work and formulate simple ways of living that work for us, that empower us. Fired up. Anyway, another element in our lives that generational trauma interferes with might be our traditions or cultures that are passed down. Although our traditions are designed to create rules or guidelines amongst our community, sometimes those rules may be confining and can do more harm than good, meaning they can keep us from being our authentic selves and living the life we imagine. For example, being forced or rushing into marrying someone at a young age when you're trying to figure yourself out, meaning cultivating your personality, your interests, hobbies, etc. And when you're and where you are forced to do so, even though you never took the time to get to know the person and might not even like them. This interferes with emotional availability since what you wanted for your life was not valued or respected as a kid, and your thoughts, feelings, and emotions were not validated, and you were stuck to the confines of that certain tradition or culture. This does more harm than good because when you get older, you lose sight of yourself, what makes you you, and you are living your life based off of what others think and take the easy way out. This pattern yields a people pleaser who does not know how to lead their own lives and is controlled by what others think. Emotional availability is impacted because you push your true feelings aside and are not able to live in your truth. This may also cause a demise in relationships because if someone is controlled as a child, cannot speak for themselves, are not able to be who they are, as they get older, they will seek control in relationships and turn into manipulation and gaslighting to get it. Our children are subconsciously reaping the damage, but this can affect their future partners as well. This is a never ending vicious cycle of, you said it, generational trauma, since if we can't speak our minds, express our thoughts, feelings, make our own choices, especially with who we want to spend the rest of our lives with, then how can we genuinely connect with others? How can we feel comfortable in our own skin? What's our identity? And is there room for personal freedom and growth? Or are we stuck to the confines of our traditions? Don't get me wrong, traditions are great since they make us feel connected to others of a similar background. But depending on what the tradition or rule is, it can be a little confining. And after all, rules or patterns or ways of thinking are meant to be broken. As human beings, we're designed to fight the old patterns and ways of thinking and not stay stuck in the dark ages. If this continues, it can be passed down to our future generations who will only repeat the same patterns, which lock us in, and this cycle will be repeated until it is broken. I'm not saying traditions are bad, as I respect all cultures and religions for what they are. I am solely giving another perspective on how certain cultural rules or regulations might be holding us back, but I can't speak for anyone. Here's the deal, team. I am bringing this to your attention because I can't let you operate under the patterns that are not working for you. I can't let these patterns or loops be passed down to future generations, and I can't be the only one to help break the mold. The fight comes down to you too, to lead and pave the way for your present, future generations. I know it sounds overwhelming, but any sort of change does not happen overnight, since it takes time to end this cycle of generational trauma and break the chains. We are not bound or tied to anything, including ways of thinking that stand in the way of channeling who we truly are to the core and who we are in our hearts. Remember, we are not a product of our environment. We owe it to ourselves to break free of the chains that are holding us back and that are causing us to stay stuck. The chains that confine the ones before us. We need to live our lives the way we want, but without hurting one, okay? Can't hurt anybody. Deal? Deal. And remember, we are not ruthless and we don't hurt other people. Also, as human beings, it is our right to be in touch with our emotions, understand our crayon box of emotions as well, not discard them, but to listen, understand, not act out and hurt other people, but seek to understand. And never, I mean never, let anyone ever tell you how to feel. And never let anyone ever tell you how to live your life. Deal? Deal. Our emotions are a part of who we are, and we have the superpower to wholeheartedly feel, to express, communicate, be vulnerable, to be bold, and stand in our power and truth, and to just be. The buck stops here, team, and it will take time to release the attachments we were operating under. But remember, all good things take time and patience, and it is vital to make a change for the better. When you make these changes, resistance will appear and you will feel as if you're walking through a storm where you can't see, where there is no clarity and no clear path. As fear enters in, you will say to yourself, did I make the right choice? This is too hard and it isn't comfortable, so maybe I need to turn around and head back. No. When you are breaking a pattern, you can't turn around and you walk back into the pattern and that does not align with your personal growth. You can't, and I won't let you. You also can't go to the left, you can't go to the right, you cannot jump over it, go under it, because those patterns or attachments that you're breaking away from are all around you. So the only way out is, you guessed it, is through. And I promise that once you walk through and break free, you will feel the weight lift from your shoulders. Be in touch with your own thoughts and thinking and be the leaders of your own life. And you can pass that down to future generations. You're not only saving your life, but saving lives of the ones around you and the ones of the future, because without this, what do we have? Generational trauma is bigger than both me and you and takes mental strength and courage to shatter, which we are all born with, but needs to be acted upon. Our environments can shape us or break us. So decide the kind of person that you want to be. Just because we may not see eye to eye with the ones who raised us doesn't make us bad people. It means we have a mind of our own, have our own independent way of thinking that works for us, that is more in tune or aligned with our goals, values, what we want for the future, and pushes us forward. We as human beings are not meant to live in a loop or operate under patterns of thinking because it makes us feel safe. We are not designed to stay stuck. Otherwise, how can we progress? I tend to say pattern and loop quite a bit throughout this podcast, but it's only because we operate under patterns that might not be healthy. We are not supposed to live in the safe zone, because if we do, we are dead. And if we push our emotions aside and don't lead from an authentic place, then who are we? Which is why it is so important to literally sit with ourselves in silence and ask, how did we get to where we are today? To think about our past, our childhood, our patterns, habits, and checking in with ourselves and saying, hey, is this working for me? Or did I learn this pattern or attachment from someone else? Was I taught this? Or did I acquire this because I wanted to? And also, I don't want to hear the, well, I'm too busy to self reflect and blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. And no. You make time for things that you want to make time for. And if you don't stop, take a minute, self reflect, and recalibrate, then you are running in place in the hamster wheel, repeating the same patterns that got you where you are in this moment, running from your emotions and are now afraid to face the truth. You may not only be hurting yourself, but others too, because of patterns you were taught to operate under by the ones that you trusted the most. Yeah, the truth hurts sometimes, but truth is a wake up call that those changes need to be made, unless we want to stay stuck in the dark ages and never progress. And if I seem fired up, it's because I am on your side, okay? Enough is enough here. But I'll keep it cool like a cucumber, okay, over here. As we enter, you already guessed it, I have the best team, the Note Bene or Note Well section of the episode. This is my team. These are my peeps. I love it. All right. So I know this was a lot to uncover, and I appreciate you being in this space with me. The key here is to remember that you have the power to change your mindset, to break free from those patterns, attachments, or chains of generational trauma that are holding you back and causing you to not live your truth. Is it scary to break out of the comfort zone? Yes, it is. But is it worth it? Yes, it is. Because you're not only fighting for personal freedom for yourself, but you're actively taking the scissors in your hands and making the active choice to cut yourself free from the patterns of attachments that are holding you back and are causing you to not only run in place, but live a life that is not for you. The same patterns that generate emotional unavailability in your life affect your relationships with your loved ones and are passed down to future generations. Remember, you have the superpower to say, the buck stops with me. The power to do the deep inner work, understand how you got to your present moment, and decide where you want to go next and figure out what works for you, as in capital YOU and no one else. Don't forget the power of self reflection, where we create a space where we gently sit with ourselves with grace, understand that crayon box of emotions that we all have, and look at them with acceptance and patience, since we are human. If we judge ourselves for having emotions that are less than happy, is that coming from you? Or is that someone else's thought, opinion, or pattern that you subconsciously adopted for yourself? During self reflection, it's important to remember how your parents or grandparents were raised and how they live or lead their lives. Maybe they were born in another country where they fought for their freedom and didn't have time to process emotions, to think, or even talk about them, or even self reflect because they had to keep going. They had to keep fighting for their lives. Or maybe your parents grew up in a controlling household where feelings were viewed as weakness and therefore think that controlling their children's lives, actions, and feelings is the way to raise children because that's all they know. Just because that is what they know doesn't mean you have to walk down the same path. By taking the time, as foreign and unknown as it sounds, to look objectively, you will start to see some of their patterns and their ways of thinking as your own and realize that's not my voice. That's not me. I don't connect with that. And can even say, I'm not making that attachment. But how do we break free from those patterns and create healthier ones that align with us? Well, the first step is recognizing that patterns to begin with and to forgive yourself because you didn't know that these paradigms existed. You didn't realize that you were operating under someone else's command and not your own. If anger pops up, that's okay. It needs to be felt, healed, and released. And when that happens, forgiveness not only for yourself, but for your parents enter in as well. And you can move on and step into the light of personal freedom. Another step is to practice forgiveness not only for yourself, but for the ones that raised you, because guaranteed they were taught the same patterns that you want to break free from. and either didn't realize that they were living their life this way and grew up during a time where emotions were not discussed. Or maybe they had the fear to break free, and the fog of resistance were both too strong, and therefore did not unknowingly break through the chains of generational trauma. Another takeaway is to keep in mind the importance of staying calm, cool, and collected, like the third bowl of porridge in Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and not letting your emotions take over. Just because you may not like all of the colors or emotions in your box of crayons, it was a tough one to get out, doesn't mean you can throw them away, because just like every colored crayon has its own purpose, so does each emotion. The key is to accept that they are there, not avoid them or discard them, but practice acceptance and know that we, as humans, are perfectly imperfect. And that's what makes us complete. That's what fills up our box of crayons. Emotional availability is when we leave room within ourselves to feel our emotions, not fear them or let them overpower us, but to understand that even though we might be scared showing our emotions to others and letting our guards down, we do it anyway. Since we don't want to be understood, since we want to be understood and we want to connect with others on a deeper level. Emotions are not meant to be feared. They are meant for us to deeply connect. As I mentioned in the fourth episode about the foundation of relationships, signs of emotional availability in a person includes the ability to have difficult conversations without being emotionally charged and fired up, where they don't have the victim mentality and feel as if they are being attacked. This person holds themselves accountable for their actions and are not afraid to honor their emotions. They don't react. They create a safe space for others to express their feelings and confide in them without being judged or criticized, and where all emotions are honored. This is a place where we are not afraid to let our walls down, even though there is a probability or chance we will get hurt. But knowing the importance of taking a chance or a risk and letting people in and allowing them to see us for our true selves. Here's the deal. As humans, we are designed to be resilient. And if we get hurt, well, we heal, dust ourselves off, and keep going and make room for the good and the bad. Because, hey, just because something is bad doesn't mean we can't learn from it and apply it to our lives and make it better. Every experience, whether good or bad, can be learned from and to help us move forward and step into personal freedom. We all have a choice in our lives, a choice to move towards listening to our inner voice, channeling our self awareness of who we are, our intuition, and taking one small step after another to break through the chains of generational trauma and walk through the fog to step into our power and our truth. But remember, it's not about us. It's about the people around us and the future generations. And also, we have the power to pick which side of the coin we want to be on. And I will leave that up to you. Until next time on Gen Talks, where we talk about what healthy and unhealthy attachment styles look like in relationships. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like, comment, share, or subscribe on YouTube, and to like and follow on Spotify. Or if you want to follow me along on Instagram, you can find me at Jen, you know it, with one N, Talks, TALKS podcast. Thanks for tuning in, but more importantly, thank you for being you. Sending you all peace, light, and love. Take care. Until next time.